Hey there, friends. Welcome to the Taking Your Next Step podcast from Collegians for Christ. Through each episode, we will journey together focusing on knowing what you believe and why you believe it. If you are eager, like I am, to strengthen your faith and take your next step now by joining us in today's episode.
Well, we continue our study looking at the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5 through 7. And we come to a portion of it where Jesus is really reversing our thinking. He's reversing the religious leaders of that time, their thinking, how they looked at the law, how they thought that God wanted things. The problem was they had added so many things, if you will, their thoughts, their processes to the law. They had made it unkeepable, unbearable for other people. So Jesus comes in our upcoming passages here, and he says it 6 different times, "You have heard, but I say unto you." So what is Jesus doing? He's saying, look, I'm reversing your thinking. He's really digging into a more deeper morality that the law demanded. You see, to keep the law as God intended, people could not get by with just lip service. And that's what they were doing. They were making the outside look clean, but the inside was not. The inside had issues and evil. And even though on the appearance, they looked like the most righteous religious people, Jesus is coming on the scene and saying, look, you need to reverse your thinking because you've got it all wrong. And so he goes in and he begins to deal with the source of behaviors. And we've talked about that. And it's the heart. Behaviors are outward signs of inward beliefs or inward problems. You know, what we believe, we will behave like. And our beliefs come out in our behavior. And so Jesus is not trying to put a Band-Aid on the issue. He's trying to get down to the root problem. And that's what he's trying to help us with as we go through here. We'll read just a few verses here in our passage, and Matthew chapter 5 verses 21 through 26. We won't read all of them, but it says this: "Ye have heard that it has been said by them of old time, Thou shalt not kill. And whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say unto you that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whosoever shall say to his brother, Raca, shall be in danger of the council. But whosoever shall say, Thou fool, shall be in danger of hell fire. Therefore, if thou bring thy gift to the altar, and there rememberest that thy brother have aught against thee, leave there thy gift before the altar, and go thy way. First be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift." And so Jesus here gives us some very powerful teachings on how to deal with anger and how to deal with our enemies. And so we want to look, first of all, of how to deal with our anger. And so anger can be a big issue. And so Jesus said the Jews were taught not to kill. We see that very clearly. Murder is evil, is what he's saying, but let me tell you the truth about murder. Jesus reveals 3 levels of anger that he equates to the same as murder. You know, often when you witness to people, you may be trying to help them to see their need for Jesus, so you may use the law. And you know, have you ever lied? Have you ever stolen? Have you ever wanted something that somebody else has? Well, the Bible tells us, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet. And you say, if you stood before God on judgment day, you know, how would you stand? Would you be innocent or guilty? And so many times they'll say, well, I'm guilty. And often I will get this response, but I've never killed anybody. And that's great. I'm glad as I'm talking to you that you're not a murderer, that you've not killed someone. And sometimes we can rationalize in our own minds, and other people do the same, that, okay, I've done these things, but I've not done the worst. I've not taken someone's life. So therefore God should show me favor. God should allow me into heaven because I've not murdered someone. But Jesus steps on the scene and says, look, the issues of your heart are the same as you acting it out physically. And he says, if you're angry with someone, there's no difference in that than murder. Why is that? Why would that be the same in his eyes? Because anger is the root that murder comes from. And so if you and I are angry, we have the potential to hurt someone, murder someone. And that's what he says. You have to deal with the heart problem. So we understand anger is a violent passion of the mind, and it's usually accompanied with some desire to take vengeance. Like you get angry, somebody did something to you, they tore down your name, they hurt you emotionally, they harmed you physically, and so it leads you to want to take vengeance on them. And anger can hurt people. Anger can get out of control. It can lead to violence. It can lead to emotional hurt. increased mental stress, and yes, even murder. So here Jesus goes down 3 types of anger, and they really build upon each other. The first one was anger without a cause. And so that's harboring inward resentment towards another without a cause. He used the word judgment there in our passage. They'll be brought before the judgment. And so this is the lower court, the council of 3 in a local synagogue. And so this is kind of minor infraction. If you look at our law, you would think about you have a superior court, you have a supreme court, and you have also one that's lower than that, that would deal with minor infractions. Then you go to superior court, it would deal with higher type criminal activity. And then the Supreme Court, of course, deals with major issues. And so here is kind of the lowest court. So that's where you begin. The second part he talks about here, referring to someone as raka, that you refer to them as an empty-headed person. Basically, it'd be like in our day and time saying, you idiot. It's an outward expression of dislike. And so this is causeless anger has now exploded into outward expression of words. You think so often when you get angry or somebody's gotten angry at you, it typically starts with them having emotional, frustration, but then it comes out typically in words, in expressions. People will cuss you out. People will try to tear you down. They'll say things or call you names. And that's where this is turned into. Remember, this is all the same root, no matter if you're at the very beginning with causeless anger, if you're here now lashing out on someone, this is still the same root as murder. And so now the judgment will be the council, which is like the Supreme Court. Now, our third level of anger here, it reaches the height with verbal and physical fighting. Now you're saying, thou fool, right? You're a rebel. You're worthless. This was a serious charge there in their culture and in their time. And the judgment here is hellfire. It's the valley of Gehenna, the south side of Jerusalem, where garbage was burnt and criminal corpses were put. So we understand each builds and grows in severity and in judgment, and Jesus reveals that a person can commit murder without shedding a drop of blood. Think about that. You and I can commit murder just by being angry with someone. Jesus says there's no difference. And so you and I have to get off our high soapbox, our high mighty horse that we ride around on thinking we're so much better than other people. You and I harbor such inward sins. Why? Because the heart is deceitful. It's desperately wicked, and it can lead us astray. And we're going to talk in the future about the Jesus versus religion. We're going to talk about the dangers of legalism. And one of the main dangers is you and I can base our righteousness on our performance, and you and I begin to look down our noses at other people. And so we think we can clean up the outside and we're so much better. But Jesus says, look, it's not about the outside. He says, look, please get me. As he goes through the Sermon on the Mount, it's about your heart. Just like you can commit adultery by lusting, even though you've not physically done the act of adultery or had the physical affair, when you have it in your mind, it's no different than physical. And so he goes down and says, look, reconciliation is so important. That's where he says, look, if this is going on, he tells us, say, therefore, look, you need to do this. If you remember that you're angry with someone or someone's angry with you, you need to go to them. You need to make it right. You need to bring thy gift to the altar. And if you remember, as you're bringing your gift to the altar, you remember your brother has ought against thee, leave. So he says, look, reconciliation is more important than worship. Think about that. We understand we should go to church and we understand we should worship. But he says, look, having things right between you and your brother, between other Christians, is so vitally important that it's more important than your worship of that moment. That you and I should be more concerned about getting things right with others than about going and worshiping me. He says, look, put on the back burner for a moment, worshiping me. Put on the back burner essentially Sunday morning service. And go get things right with that person that you're angry with, or maybe he's angry with you. Now, we understand sometimes people may be angry with us. So what are we to do with that? How are we to make things right? Well, he tells us in Matthew 18, verses 15 through 17, he says, "Moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone." So how are we to reconcile? We're to go to that person. We are to communicate with them. We're to try to make things right. And Jesus said, look, this is so important. I mean, think about how much the New Testament and even the whole body of Scripture talks about unity among brethren. Paul deals with it extensively, about how good it is for you and I to dwell in unity, about how vital it is that the church is in unity. He talks about the body, and we're all different parts of the same body, and we must be in unity. We must be one because Christ is one. And he says, look, it's so important that you and I get things right. Maybe you have an issue right now with your spouse or with a boyfriend, girlfriend, or with a sibling. He says, look, try your best to make things right. Now, I understand, and you may understand as well, because we're dealing with people, it's not always easy to make things right. But Jesus gives us the model, if you will, what we are to do. We're to go to them. We're try to reconcile. And sometimes that may be you swallowing your pride and saying sorry, and being on the initiative and saying sorry. You may be the one that it was inflicted to. And so you may, as they say sorry, say, hey, I forgive you. And forgiveness doesn't mean we forget, but it does mean we're able to move forward and put that thing behind us and learn from it. But what happens if we go to them and they're unwilling to reconcile? Because this does happen. He says, look, if that happens, he says, look, if that does work, you've gained your brother. But if he or she will not hear thee, then take with thee one or two more, that in the mouth of two or three witnesses every word may be established. He says, okay, if it didn't work the first time, now I want you to take a couple people with you. Not people that are going to jump on your side. I want you to take a couple people that can be witnesses, that can help mediate it. So this may be a counselor, it may be a pastor, it may be a friend, but it's someone that can remain neutral and help mediate the situation. And so they're going to help try to guide, give some counsel, give some guidance there as to what can happen, maybe how they can help. And that way words cannot get construed, anger cannot get explosive. There's someone there to help contain it, because obviously you went to them alone the first time and it didn't work out. Now we're to go to them with a few people and see what happens there. And we're still trying for that reconciliation. And then he goes down and says, look, and if that doesn't work, so you're trying to be reconciled, you said, okay, I understand it's more important than worship. So I'm really trying to get this. I'm praying about it, asking that they will, whether they need for you to say sorry and then forgive you, or vice versa, whatever the case is. And so he says, look, now if they will not hear you, and you are truly trying to reconcile, he says a powerful phrase here in our passage. He says, and if he shall neglect to hear them, tell it unto the church. But if he neglect to hear the church, let him be unto thee as a heathen and a publican. Now we understand this passage deals specifically with like church discipline, but it also is the same model for you and I to deal with people in the workplace, within family. It's Jesus' prescription of how to reconcile with people. And he says, look, now they won't hear the two or three. You need to maybe incorporate a larger body, or let the church know if it's a sin that the church needs to know about. But he says here, if they will not hear thee, they're not willing to reconcile, let him be unto thee as a heathen man and a publican. Look, you cannot force people to reconcile. You cannot force people to forgive you. You cannot force people to be sorry for what they've done to you. And that's hard, especially when it's people that are close to you, close relationships. But he says this, powerful. He says, look, let them be unto thee as a heathen man and a publican. What are you and I to do? We're to mark them and realize, hey, they are, just as the Israelites would look at a heathen and a publican, they are put to the side. It means it's okay to set a boundary. It is okay to walk away from them. It's okay. Now, as a heathen and publican, doesn't mean we're still not trying to win them. We're still not going to love them. Jesus walked towards the heathen and the publican, but we must understand there's times when people may harm you physically, emotionally. There may be people that had narcissistic tendencies. And when this occurs, Jesus is not asking us to be a doormat. Jesus is not asking us to continue putting ourselves in situations to be physically hurt, emotionally abused, verbally abused. There are times when you must draw a line and you must place a boundary. And when that person is not willing to reconcile with you, then you are to mark them. And it says as a heathen and publican, which means you can distance yourself from them, and that's okay. So then he tells us, hey, look, I want to reverse your thinking on enemies, and I want you to reverse your thinking on anger. So he says our enemies were to do this in our passage. He says there's 4 degrees of offense and a reaction to each here. We are to love our enemies. We are to curse, the ones that curse us, we're to bless them. Those that hate us, we're to do good to them. And those that despitefully use us and persecute us, we're to do what? We're to pray for them. And this is not always easy to do. But Jesus calls us to a higher standard of living. And as you have experienced God's love, you know what it means to be loved undeservedly. Now, we're not saying be a doormat. I want to make sure I'm very clear with that. And I try to be very clear with students as we talk to them. We want to forgive. We want to reconcile. But unfortunately, with people, with sin, there are times when reconciliation can't be had at the moment. And so sometimes we must distance ourselves. Jesus said, mark them as a heathen and a publican. Doesn't mean we don't continue walking towards them. Doesn't mean we don't continue praying, because that's what we're to do for the heathen and the publican. We're to pray for them. We're to try to witness to them. It may be somebody needs Jesus so that it'll help their heart. It may be that they need time. It may be they need conviction, whatever it is. And sometimes the Holy Spirit has to work there. But you and I have to remember, you and I are called to a higher standard of living. And remember, you've experienced God's love undeservedly. You and I do not deserve the love that God gives us. And so you and I are to show that love to other people. And sometimes you and I love people by giving them space, by allowing them time to process, by drawing a boundary. It seems hard. It seems like not the right thing to do, but Jesus says this is what you must do. You must mark them because they're not willing to forgive. They're not willing to say sorry. They're not willing to reconcile with you. And so as we look at this, Jesus tries to reverse our thinking, and he does so in a powerful way. We need to love those that are against us. We need to pray for those who maybe despitefully use us and persecute us. We're to bless those who curse us. And so you and I live different in this world. We are to live like Jesus.
Thank you for taking the time to listen. If this podcast has been helpful to you, please share it with a friend or subscribe to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can connect with Collegians for Christ online for more information and resources at cfccampusministry.com.